Have you ever felt like someone was studying you, not to understand you, but to control you? They smile, they listen, they offer help. But deep down, something feels off. These people don't come with warning signs. They come with compliments, with patience, with a perfect act. And before you realize it, they've found a way into your mind, not by force, but by strategy. This video is about those people, the ones who drain your energy while pretending to care. The ones who turn your openness into ammunition. They're not always loud. Sometimes the most dangerous manipulator is the one who never raises their voice. And that's exactly why you need more than instinct to deal with them. You need wisdom. The ancient Stoics faced betrayal politics and power plays long before we had words like toxic or gaslighting. But their response wasn't fear. It was discipline, precision. They taught that true strength is not in domination, but in understanding the game and refusing to play it on their terms. In this video, we're not here to rant. We're here to equip you with calm clarity and practical Stoic tactics that protect your mind, your boundaries, and your peace. You'll learn how to recognize manipulation when it's dressed as friendship, how to guard your energy without becoming cold, and how to respond, not with anger, but with strategy. If you've ever walked away from a conversation, feeling confused, guilty, or emotionally drained, this is for you. Because once you understand what you're dealing with, you'll never be caught off guard again. Let's begin. And this time, you won't just survive the game. You'll rise above it. One guard, your inner fears. A skilled manipulator doesn't always come with threats. Sometimes they come with curiosity, a gentle question, a well-timed joke, a look of concern. And that's how it starts. Not with force, but with subtle exploration, trying to uncover what you fear, what keeps you up at night, what makes you hesitate when others charge forward. When you reveal too much too soon, especially about your insecurities, you give others a hidden advantage. You hand over the keys to your emotional triggers often in the name of honesty, connection, or trust. But let's be brutally honest here. Not everyone listening deserves access to your private truths. Some people don't want to understand you. They want to weaken you. And they'll do it with your own fears. The Stoics understood this centuries ago. They weren't emotionless. They were alert, disciplined, aware that every fear, if exposed carelessly, could become a chain in someone else's hands. Epictetus said it well. It's not what happens that troubles us, but our interpretation of it. Manipulators aim to learn those interpretations and twist them into traps. Let's imagine a common example. A man confesses to a colleague that he's afraid of looking foolish in front of others. Months later, right before an important presentation, that same colleague smirks and says, "This is your moment. Hope you don't freeze like last time." It sounds like banter, but it's surgical. The manipulator didn't threaten. They simply reminded him of his fear and watched it do the rest. That's how emotional power works. It doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers reminders of your worst memories and deepest doubts. And that's why the Stoic approach is to guard the inner citadel. To know yourself deeply, but reveal yourself wisely. This doesn't mean you must pretend you don't feel fear. Quite the opposite. You must understand your fears so clearly that no one else can use them against you. But you don't offer them up to just anyone. You learn to observe your emotions with quiet dignity, speak with intent, and measure your words carefully, especially when the person in front of you hasn't earned your trust through real integrity and consistent action. When you overshare with the wrong person, you risk giving them tools they never should have had. The fear of being alone, the fear of not being enough, the fear of repeating past mistakes once in the wrong hands. These can all be used to steer you subtly without you even realizing it. So what's the solution? Self-discipline, reflection, the habit of asking yourself why you feel the urge to share. Is it because you want to be understood, or because you're seeking validation? Are you expressing strength, or handing over control? The Stoic path isn't about silence. It's about wisdom. Silence when needed. Vulnerability when safe. Sharing only what strengthens, never what weakens. And when someone tries to uncover your soft spots through charm or fake concern, the Stoic doesn't panic. He listens. He smiles. But he reveals nothing that can be used as a weapon later. There's power in being unreadable. There's strength in leaving your fears unspoken, not because you're afraid to feel them, but because you've already faced them on your own. That kind of man, the one who has stood calmly before his own fears and refused to let them rule him, cannot be manipulated. He is not shaken. He is not pushed. Mastery over fear is not the absence of feeling. It's the presence of control. It's the ability to move through discomfort without becoming a servant to it. And it's in that strength that you become untouchable, not by hiding who you are, but by choosing wisely who gets to see it. So when someone asks you a little too eagerly about what makes you nervous, what you regret, or what you fear, pause. Think. And if their actions haven't earned your trust, offer them nothing they can bend against you. Keep your stillness. Keep your center. Let them walk away empty-handed. That is how the Stoic wins, not through confrontation, but through mastery. And when the game begins, the one who guards his inner world will always have the advantage. 2. Don't surrender your judgment. In a world that spins on headlines and hot takes, where people form opinions in seconds, and outrage spreads faster than reflection, one quiet truth remains: your ability to think clearly is your greatest defense. And yet, this is precisely what manipulators try to hijack. Not your body, not even your words, but your judgment. Manipulators don't need to raise their voice. They don't need to argue or threaten. All they need to do is make you believe something you didn't question. Because once they control what you believe, they control how you feel. And once they've shaped your feelings, they don't need to force your decisions. You'll make the ones they want and think they were your own. That's why Stoic philosophy teaches that your judgment must never be surrendered, not to pressure, not to emotion, and certainly not to charm. Epictetus said, "If someone gossips about you, don't scramble to explain or defend. Instead, recognize that what they say reflects their view, not your reality." There's a deeper lesson here. Your peace doesn't come from being understood. It comes from being rooted in reason. Modern manipulators thrive on your willingness to assume. They exploit the fact that most people want to believe what feels good, what flatters the ego, or what confirms hidden fears. And so, they present information, not as opinion, but as fact. They cloak their stories in sincerity. They say, "I just thought you should know," or "Everyone's been talking about it." And if you're not careful, you'll take their words as truth before ever asking why they said them and what they might stand to gain. Let me tell you a different kind of story. A man named Darren worked in a nonprofit. He believed deeply in collaboration and loyalty. Then came Simon, charming, helpful, a great listener. Within a month, Simon seemed to be everyone's confidant. He approached Darren and said, "I've noticed they've been sidelining you in meetings. Honestly, you're doing the heavy lifting, but others are getting the credit. It's not fair." Darren, feeling seen, began to share more. Little frustrations, private doubts. Simon nodded, always empathetic. But soon, tensions rose in the team. Meetings turned cold. Alliances shifted. What Darren didn't know was that Simon was feeding similar stories to others, twisting small facts to spark insecurity, isolation, and mistrust. The result? Chaos. And when leadership needed to assign blame, Darren looked like the divisive one. Simon never attacked. He only whispered. He only told people what they were ready to believe. And it worked, because no one paused to question the source. That's how belief, when unguarded, becomes a weapon. Not because you're weak, but because you didn't stop to filter what entered your mind. A Stoic does not believe everything, nor do they reject everything. They examine. They ask, who is speaking? Why now? What do they gain by telling me this? They don't react based on how something feels. They respond based on what holds up under scrutiny. In today's world, the need for this clarity has only grown. Algorithms feed us headlines designed to provoke, not inform. Friends-forward gossip masked as concern. Even family may offer guidance shaped more by fear than by wisdom. You must become the one who steps back, not because you're suspicious, but because you respect truth enough to test it before you trust it. This kind of thinking doesn't happen by accident. It's a discipline. It begins with small pauses. Someone makes a bold claim, and instead of agreeing or pushing back, you calmly ask, where did you hear that a news article angers you? And instead of sharing it, you ask, what do they want me to feel and why? Even praise deserves your scrutiny. If someone flatters you too perfectly, is it encouragement or influence? The goal isn't to become cold. It's to become clear. To make your mind a place that cannot be easily shaken, not because it's closed, but because it's ordered. Marcus Aurelius, who ruled an empire surrounded by flattery, betrayal, and propaganda, reminded himself daily, be firm, like a rock against which the waves break, yet it stands unmoved. He wasn't asking himself to be stubborn. He was calling himself to be anchored in judgment. And you must do the same. Manipulators are not most afraid of strength. They are afraid of the person who thinks for themselves, the one who doesn't rush, the one who sees through urgency, the one who listens but does not absorb until the truth is clear. That kind of person is untouchable. So the next time someone offers you a story, especially one that tugs at your emotions, don't rush to feel it. Pause, think, ask, observe what rises in you and why, and then choose your belief deliberately as a Stoic would not, because it's convenient, but because it's been earned. That pause is where your freedom lives. And the more you practice it, the harder it becomes for anyone to control your perception, your emotions, or your decisions. You don't need to know everything, but you do need to protect your ability to judge. Because once that's gone, everything else can be manipulated. And now that you've reclaimed that inner filter, you're ready for the next layer of defense, the strength of saying less, when silence itself becomes strategy. 3. Pause before joy betrays you. Joy is one of the most intoxicating emotions we experience. It lifts us, energizes us, gives us hope. But beneath its glow lies a hidden vulnerability, because when you're filled with happiness, you're also most likely to lower your defenses. That's the paradox. It's not during crisis that you're most at risk. It's during celebration, when everything feels like it's finally coming together. That's when you're least prepared for deceit. Manipulators know this. They don't always show up when you're struggling. They wait silently, patiently for your high points, your victories, your moments of pride. Not to celebrate you, but to quietly steer your joy towards their advantage. And unless you practice awareness in those very moments, joy can become a smokescreen, blinding you from what's really happening. The Stoics never rejected joy. They honored it, but they insisted that every emotion, even the most beautiful, must be governed by reason. Seneca wrote of gratitude as a noble quality, but he also warned that any emotion, if allowed to overthrow judgment, can lead to folly. That includes happiness, especially happiness. Let me tell you a story. Thomas had just published his first book. Years of effort, sacrifice, and self-doubt had finally paid off. Congratulations poured in, interviews, speaking, offers, celebration dinners. Then came a message from a fellow author, someone Thomas barely knew but had always admired. "You're on fire," the man said, "and I've got this collaboration opportunity that'll push your name to the next level. It's time to go big." Thomas, still riding the wave of success, barely hesitated. He said yes. Months later, he discovered his ideas had been repackaged and sold without credit. His reputation wasn't boosted, it was borrowed, and then discarded. Why did it happen? Because in that rush of triumph, Thomas wanted to believe that success made him immune to risk. But the truth is, joy doesn't make you safer. It makes you more open, and sometimes too open. There's also the story of Nadia. She had just returned from a spiritual retreat, feeling transformed, peaceful, reinvigorated. She was glowing. An old friend reached out with warmth and nostalgia, saying, "I've missed you, and I think you're just the right person to help me with something special I've been working on." Flattered and in a generous state of mind, Nadia agreed to lend a hand. At first, it seemed like a meaningful partnership, but over time, the requests increased, the pressure mounted, and the friendship slowly shifted into obligation. What began as a connection turned into quiet exploitation, all because she hadn't paused to ask, "Is this person returning because they care, or because I'm in a generous place?" You see, joy creates momentum, and momentum can make us overlook the details. We stop asking questions. We assume the good we feel must mean good intentions surround us. But the Stoic knows that joy, while valuable, is never an excuse to abandon discernment. The disciplined mind learns to enjoy fully, but respond deliberately. It welcomes the feeling without immediately acting on it. It asks simple but powerful questions. Would I still agree to this if I weren't in such a good mood? Does this offer serve my long-term values, or just my current excitement? What is being asked of me while I'm smiling? That's not cynicism. That's wisdom. Manipulators prefer your joy over your sorrow, because joy makes you generous, trusting, and eager to please. You want others to celebrate with you. You want to share the light you feel. And in doing so, you may end up giving pieces of yourself away, time, energy, money, boundaries, just to keep the atmosphere positive. You might even ignore subtle red flags, simply because they don't match the mood you're in. But the Stoic practices a deeper kind of happiness. It's not based on applause or external validation. It doesn't require the world to cheer. It runs quiet. It lives in alignment with values, not moments. This is a joy that doesn't need to say yes, just to prove it's joyful. A joy that can pause, reflect, and if needed, say no without guilt. Here's a simple habit that can save you whenever something amazing happens. Whether it's recognition, a promotion, a compliment, a big opportunity. Take 24 to 48 hours before making any major decision that follows it. Not to delay happiness, but to protect it. The time you take to reflect will reveal what's genuine and what's cleverly disguised. Because the world doesn't just test you in hardship, it also tests your judgment in triumph. And the greater your joy, the more essential it is to hold it with humility and clarity. So the next time someone enters your life in the glow of your success, asking for something, pitching an idea, offering a sudden alliance, don't rush. Celebrate inwardly. Smile. But give yourself space to think. That space is your shield. That pause is your power. If any part of this message resonates with you, if you've ever been blindsided during a season of joy, know that you're not alone. But you're wiser now. You don't have to repeat the mistake. Because once you master the discipline of thinking clearly during celebration, you're no longer an easy target. You become grounded, steady, and sovereign over your own decisions. And that is the beginning of real freedom. Up next, we'll explore something even more subtle, how your silence can become a powerful defense when others demand explanation. Let's move forward. 4. Set limits, not lifelines. One of the most deceptive tactics manipulators use doesn't come in the form of threats or insults. It comes disguised as kindness. They offer you help, a small favor, a thoughtful gesture, and they do it with a smile, never asking for anything at first. But what seems like generosity is sometimes the opening move in a longer game, one that trades compassion for compliance. Here's how it works. They give you something you didn't ask for, something that genuinely benefits you. And then they wait, not for gratitude, but for leverage. Because they understand something most good-hearted people don't always realize: when someone helps you, your instinct is to give back. That's human nature. It's the principle of reciprocity, the social glue that holds real friendships and communities together. But when that instinct is manipulated, it becomes a leash. Stoic philosophy reminds us that while gratitude is a virtue, submission is not. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If it's not right, don't do it. If it's not true, don't say it." That includes doing things just because someone once helped you. When your choices are driven by guilt rather than reason, your values are no longer your own. Let's look at a story that illustrates this trap. Laura was a young intern who was struggling to find her footing in a new city. Her colleague Richard noticed and offered to help. He connected her with a landlord, introduced her to contacts, and even covered her lunch a few times. Laura was grateful. She felt seen, supported. But over time, Richard's requests began to creep in. "Can you stay late and finish my portion of the project? Could you vouch for me with the boss? Don't forget who helped you get here." Laura felt uneasy, but obligated. She told herself it was just loyalty. Until one day, he asked her to take responsibility for a serious oversight he had made. When she hesitated, his tone changed. "After everything I've done for you." That's when it clicked. This wasn't support. It was entrapment disguised as kindness. Gratitude should never require you to betray yourself. A true Stoic repays help with integrity, not with blind obedience. If someone offers you their time, their resources, or their trust, the appropriate response is appreciation, not lifelong servitude. Because if you feel like you have to repay someone to keep them pleased, that's not generosity. That's manipulation with a polite face. And this doesn't just happen in offices or institutions. It happens in families, friendships, romantic relationships, anywhere someone quietly builds a sense of emotional debt. They remind you of their sacrifices, their efforts, their past kindness. "I did this for you. You wouldn't be here without me." These statements aren't always spoken out loud. Sometimes they're implied. But the message is the same: you owe me. Kevin, for instance, had a close friend who once supported him through a rough patch. That friend, Eric, had helped him find a place to live and even loaned him money. Kevin appreciated it deeply. But a year later, Eric began to demand favors that crossed ethical lines, asking Kevin to lie on his behalf, to take the blame for his mistakes, to prioritize Eric's problems above his own boundaries. And each time Kevin hesitated, Eric said, "After all I've done for you." Eventually, Kevin realized he was no longer helping a friend. He was being used by one. Stoic wisdom teaches us to serve others from strength, not submission, to be helpful, but not to the point of self-erasure. There is a clear difference between compassion and captivity, and that difference is defined by one word: limits. So how do you establish these limits? Start by examining your why. Why are you saying yes? Is it because it aligns with your values? Or because you're afraid of seeming ungrateful? If it's fear, not conviction, pause. Next, assess the cost. Is this favor taking more than it gives? Is it consuming your time, your mental clarity, your self-respect? If so, it's no longer a kind gesture. It's a silent sacrifice. And finally, ask yourself this: is the relationship mutual or one-sided? Are you free to say no without consequences? Or is every refusal met with guilt or manipulation? Healthy relationships don't demand repayment. They give without strings. Remember, boundaries are not walls. They are doors with locks, and you decide who has the key. You are allowed to close that door even on someone who once helped you, especially if that help has turned into control. Seneca wrote that a life lived only for oneself is not a life worth living. But he also warned against giving everything away without thought. There must be balance. You serve best not when you're guilted into it, but when your actions reflect integrity, not indebtedness. You don't need to justify your limits to someone who seeks only to exploit them. A firm no rooted in clarity is more powerful than 1,000 explanations soaked in guilt. Because here's the truth: your life is not a ledger of favors owed. Your self-worth is not determined by how much you sacrifice. And someone who uses guilt to bend your will was never giving, they were investing, waiting to collect. The Stoic stands firm, not cold, not indifferent, but discerning. Giving where it uplifts, drawing the line where it protects. That's not selfish, that's wise. And once you understand that boundaries are not rejection, but protection, you reclaim something far more powerful than approval. You reclaim your peace. Now that you've learned to protect your time, energy, and values from those who treat kindness as currency, it's time to master the next layer of control: strategic silence. Because the greatest defense is often not in what you say, but in what you choose not to say. Let's go there next. 5. Protect what you reveal. In a culture that glorifies openness and emotional transparency, there's an overlooked truth that the Stoics understood long before social media made self-disclosure a trend. Not every question is innocent, and not every listener is safe. We're told to be real, be vulnerable, be authentic. But no one tells you that sometimes the very act of opening up becomes the stage upon which someone else writes a narrative you never intended. What sounds like curiosity might be calculation. What feels like connection might be information gathering. The Stoics believed in truth, but also in timing. Epictetus taught that we have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason, not just to listen more than we speak, but to protect ourselves by observing before revealing. That's not fear, that's strategy. Because what you reveal, especially when you're emotional, flattered, or caught off guard, can be transformed into a weapon by those who appear friendly but have ulterior motives. They don't need to lie to harm you. All they need is your story unfiltered, unguarded, and freely given. And once it's in their hands, it's no longer in your control. Let me share a story. Jason was new to a prestigious university program. During orientation week, he met a peer named Adam, who seemed genuinely warm. Adam asked thoughtful questions about Jason's ambitions, past struggles, family dynamics. Jason, relieved to find someone interested in him, opened up. He spoke of his imposter syndrome, how hard it was to fit in, and a conflict with his older brother that left emotional scars. Adam never shared much in return. He just listened, encouraged, took mental notes. 2 months later, Jason was shocked when one of their professors confronted him about being emotionally unstable, citing concerns raised by Adam. The details, personal, private, had been spun as reasons Jason might not be a good fit for the program. Adam never attacked him directly. He simply repurposed Jason's truth for personal gain. And in doing so, he taught Jason a hard lesson: not everyone who listens deserves your voice. This happens more often than we realize. Think of someone like Mara, who shared her trauma with a coworker after months of friendly conversation. That coworker later used it to undermine Mara's credibility in a team disagreement. Or Eric, who confided in a friend about his financial troubles, only to become the punchline in that friend's social circle. These betrayals don't always feel malicious at first, but they are, because they take what is sacred, your lived experience, and turn it into currency. So how do you protect yourself? You don't go silent, you go selective. The Stoics never preached emotional isolation. What they taught was discernment. Vulnerability is not weakness, but when offered indiscriminately, it becomes a liability. The wise man, according to Stoic teaching, speaks with purpose. He shares only what aligns with his values, and only with those who have proven themselves through action, not just attention. Before you share something intimate, ask, has this person earned the right to hear it? Have they demonstrated the maturity to hold it with care? Have they offered themselves in return? Or are they simply mining my experience while remaining a mystery? Because relationships are built on reciprocity. If the conversation only ever flows one way, if you're always the one talking, explaining, confessing, be cautious. That's not connection. That's exposure. You're not rude for being cautious. You're not cold for waiting. You're wise for protecting what is valuable. And here's something else to consider. Manipulators often use charm as a form of distraction. They appear attentive, warm, deeply engaged, not because they care, but because they know the more you talk, the more control they gain. It's a long game. And your own words become the tools they use when the time is right. But a person who has practiced self-mastery will recognize this dynamic. They won't be rushed. They'll pause before answering. They'll offer truth, but not the kind that gives away their inner architecture. They'll understand that authenticity doesn't mean spilling everything. It means showing up with intention, with clarity, and with awareness of who's listening and why. Remember, what you say cannot be unsaid. What you give cannot always be taken back. That doesn't mean you must live in silence, but it does mean you should speak with care. Ask yourself, is this an act of trust or a moment of impulse? Is this person showing compassion or simply fishing for material? Sometimes the wisest move is not to answer, to let silence do the work. Because the one who remains unreadable is the one who cannot be easily manipulated. And if someone tries to guilt you into oversharing, if they suggest you're being cold or closed off or secretive, take a step back. That is not care. That is control. Genuine people respect your timing. They're patient. They offer without demanding. And they share in return. So protect your story. Guard your scars. Choose the people who see your silence not as a wall, but as a form of self-respect. Because once you learn to speak only when it serves you, and to listen twice as much as you reveal, you become untouchable to those who prey on unfiltered truth. And what comes next is even more powerful. Once you've mastered what to say, and when the next challenge is learning when not to say anything at all, and how silence itself can become your sharpest defense. Let's go there. The world isn't always kind, and navigating it wisely requires far more than just good intentions. It demands discernment, inner stillness, and the strength to act with integrity even when others don't. If today's message helped shift your perspective or gave you something solid to hold on to, consider subscribing for more insights rooted in timeless philosophy and grounded clarity. Your personal evolution is the most effective shield you'll ever carry. Not armor made of ego or reaction, but a calm, steady growth that makes you harder to shake, harder to deceive, and impossible to manipulate. If you're on that same path, working silently to become stronger, wiser, more rooted in who you truly are, leave a comment below. Just a few words. That's your quiet affirmation, your mark in the sand that you're done being pulled by others' agendas, that you've chosen to respond with power instead of reacting with emotion. This isn't the end. It's just the next step in a longer journey. In the next video, we'll dive even deeper into how to command your inner world, how to protect your peace, and sharpen your mind without ever turning into the very thing you're trying to rise above. Keep going. There's strength in your stillness, and you're not walking this path alone.